Today we're very honored to have all the leader of the world higher education from UPenn, from Kobe College, from Thailand, and from UN universities. And it's an urgent call for us all, and especially for our speakers. So please stay tuned. And I hope that after all the presentation, we will have Q&A from the audience. And my question to the audience is, what is your urgent call to ask our honorable speakers? So now, not to further ado, let me start our session. Can I have all the speakers on the stage? Please invite Mr. Sieg Emmanuel, Professor Yume. It's going to be gender equity. So you sit here, Professor, sorry, and you there, and then the other woman. Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, this is a very high level for our pavilion, and it's so honored to have all of our speakers here with us. I will briefly introduce, and I will turn the mic for all of you to introduce yourself. I'm sure you have countless hats, but today we're going to talk about the answering an urgent call about the climate change. So on the stage, here with us, Professor Sieg Emmanuel, the Vice Provost of the Global Initiative of University of Pennsylvania. Can we give him a big hand? Yes, woohoo! The second is Professor Yume Yamaguchi from the Director of the University of, United Nations University. Please give her a big hand as well. Welcome. The third is Professor Vijan, the President of Thailand Environmental Institute. Last but not least, Professor Stacey Ann, the Dean of Global Engagement at Kobe College. She's also the consultant to many Prime Minister of the small islands. So yes, thank you for being here with us. Can I have you introduce yourself deeply? Yes, like 1 minute. No, I'm sure you guys have several hats, but thank you.
So I'm just the Vice Provost of Global Initiatives and sponsor and support the Penn engagement. We have a very large delegation here of about 30 people in engaging in all aspects of climate. I myself am an oncologist and work in areas of health policy.
And good morning, everyone, and sawadika. So my name is Yume Yamaguchi. I'm the director of the Institute for the Advanced Studies of Sustainability of the United Nations University. And the United Nations University has 13 different institutes in 12 different countries. And we are the one located in Tokyo, working on the biodiversity, climate action, water resource management, and education and sustainability. Okay, very nice meeting you. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Vichan Sumashaya. Actually, I used to work with the government sector and under Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. After my retirement, I joined non-profit organization, TI, Thailand Environment Institute, and also joined with the chairman, president of council of the University of Srisaket Rajapat University. Is the northeastern part of Thailand, small university, and work closely with the Minister of Higher Education on the research. Especially, I'm also the chairman of taking care of the research on the climate change issue. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Stacey Ann Robinson from Colby College in the United States. It's a small liberal arts college in the state of Maine. I am the second Dean of Global Engagement, and one of my charges is to think more deeply about how universities and colleges in the global north can engage ethically with communities and projects in the Global South. Most of what I do is in the Environmental Studies Department. I'm an associate professor, and my research focuses on climate adaptation in small island developing states.
Thank you to be here with us. So to begin the session, can I ask each of you, what is your urgent call as a person? What is your urgent call as a person to the planet?
Well, personally, I think a big part of my identity is from the fact that I'm from a small island developing state, Jamaica in the Caribbean. My research is shaped by that identity, and I think in my role as Dean of Global Engagement, that's going to play a central role as well. A big part of that for me is identifying the urgency of the climate challenge. Being from a small island, what that means for me is that I can actually see the sea level rising. I can actually feel the threat of my home being flooded. And because of that, it's an urgent call for me and other small islanders.
Thank you so much, Professor Stacey Ann. And not only just your small island, our city is flooded and sinking as well, like Bangkok. So thank you. Professor Vichan Ka.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for the urgent call, we have to action now. Especially Thailand is one of the top 10 vulnerability country in the world. Since Thailand emit very low contribution on the climate, especially the carbon emission less than 1%, but Thailand are going to impact, very high impact. That's why when we consider the action, we have to consider both mitigation and also adaptation, especially working on the ground is very important. Research, we are going to talk a bit more later on, especially for the local people, how they stay with the impact of the climate change.
Yes, Professor, you may.
And thank you very much for the very challenging question, because I say so because there are many challenges and many urgent calls, right? But in general, generally speaking, I was at the SDG Summit in New York this September, and according to the most recent SDG report, we all know only the half of the SDG target has been achieved, and we are in the middle point of Agenda 2030. However, according to our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, if you look at the successful implementation rate of the 169 target, it's only 15% of the target being implemented successfully. Okay, so that call itself is a very urgent call, but I think the way we can really deal with this very difficult condition globally and international community is, one, to localize the action of the climate action, but also the other SDG, the goals, and really, two, to look for the synergizing effect among the 17 goals instead of competing which goal should go first. Okay, so that's my urgent call. Thank you.
Professor, you may. Yes.
Well, for me, personally, the most urgent issue is how are we going to leave the planet for our grandchildren? And I think there's nothing more threatening than climate change, and there's nothing more urgent than solving climate change. It affects everything we have, whether it's food, just our health, our abilities to engage socially and to solve problems. And if we don't solve it, there will be chaos in the world. There's no doubt about it. And so I think for me, I'm a policy person. I worry about what policies can we implement that can solve this problem looking 10 or 20 years down the line. That's about as far as we can really project.
So I think some of the urgent call that you share with us is actually resonate in our heart as well. I think, and later on, I will put the questions back to the audience. But my second question to all of you, as a world leader organization, and you actually have so much power on the future of our generation as well, as a vice provost, as a president of the lead of the university, and as a global engaging agency. What have you done so far to answer your urgent call, the urgent call that you mentioned?
Well, as I said, we have about 30 people here, many of them engaged in the political discussions to try to frame any declaration that comes out properly, so it really does address and doesn't water down things. I would say the second thing that universities do is research, and we have a lot of, out there in the audience, there are a number of researchers from Penn working on issues of climate change, but adaptation in particular, and I think that's quite urgent. And the other thing I think universities can do is to try to serve as models in our operations and in our advocacy. We tend to be, all institutions tend to be self-centered, so if you're a university, you worry about being a university. One of the things we, I think, need to begin doing is becoming leaders in the world and advocating beyond our own self-interest for our community and region and country's self-interest, and climate change has to be at the top. I would say in large part, we can have models of sustainability in our operations, and we can be more or less disinterested leaders in the advocacy area. After all, our future is students, and there's no future for a university unless we solve this climate problem.
Thank you. Professor Yume.
Can I use the PowerPoint?
Yes,
now,
please.
or?
Yes.
I prepared a few slides just to show diverse engagement that we have at the United Nations University, because we are called United Nations University, but we're the collection of the research institute. But in Tokyo, in our institute, we have both research engagement team and education engagement team. So the first one, next one. Yeah. So we do have a postgraduate degree program, both in master and doctoral program in sustainability science. And it's a very small program, 30 students, but from 20 different countries. And we really engaged all of those young professionals to focus on climate action, biodiversity, the water resource management, and educational technology. And we try to engage them together to tackle the problem which cannot be solved with the one area of expertise. And the second slide. We are very happy to announce that we have just started the specialization in the Paris Agreement. So this is built on the existing postgraduate program, but with the diploma focusing on Paris Agreement engagement, that the learner can get the additional certificate on this. And the specialization of this Paris Agreement, in fact, we have a practical training and for the learner to be located in a different institute in Asian Pacific and beyond, so that they can really learn the issues related to climate actions. And quickly, we have a very interesting local community engagement. It is called, next one. Next slide. Yeah. It is called the Regional Centers for the Education on Sustainable Development. We have 190 partners in 62 different countries in 5 continents. And what they do is they engage the local community to identify the local resources and come up with the project, how the local community can be engaged to tackle their own issues. And we get together once a year really to discuss issues, but also the solutions the local community has been exploring. Okay, so this is some very interesting engagement. Since 2010, we started with the 11 institution, and in 20 years it has expanded to 190. Okay, this is one of the engagements.
Wow, very powerful. Thank you, Professor Yume. Professor Vichan, what Thailand
Okay.
have to show off our
Okay,
action?
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, let me have my slide presentation. I
Thank
would like
you.
to going to brief you what we have done so far,
Thank you.
especially in the university or research institute, as well as the private sector. As I myself also serve as Secretary General of the Thailand Business Council for Sustainable Development. We also work closely with the private sector. You can take a look here. The slide shows the impact of Thailand. I mentioned earlier, Thailand is the top 10 country. We are going to impact from the climate change. That's why we have to work hard on not just only mitigation but adaptation as well. Here just show you what we have done so far on the SDG 17 goal. Thailand is ranked number 43 with the 166 country. You can take a look what we already part with the two target. SDG 1 for the no poverty, SDG 4 is the quality of education. But in terms of the SDG related to the environmental issue, especially SDG 13, climate action, we still in the orange zone, especially for the 14, marine and coastal resources, we are still very a dangerous situation, even the 15 as well. That's the general Thailand situation. When we talk about the climate change, we have to look for the impact, not just only side behind the climate social issue, impact, adaptation, mitigation, and very important issue in our country. We pay more attention on the impact of the biodiversity. Since Thailand is the top number 20 of the world, we list with the biodiversity, how we can protect. When we talk about the role of university and higher education, you mentioned about the research. I think it's very important. Some research may be already done in your country, but somehow when we apply to our country, we have to do more research, especially action on the ground is very important. We have lesson learned, maybe community by community, but somehow we have to work hard, not just only scientific information, but social is very important. When we talk about the action, social action, social movement is very important. About the education curriculum, it's very important. Thailand also, we developed the new curriculum we call the climate change and circular economy. Circular economy is the one answer the question for the limited of our natural resources, climate emission, carbon emission, and also with the new career. Especially we talk about the green job that would be respond to that. Operation also very important. Even the external leader talk to people. Universities payroll on that. I would like to give you some example that we work on. We call Green University, UI University, initiated by University of Indonesia in the year 2010, and a lot of universities in the region talk about Green University with the very important issue related to climate change. For example, infrastructure for the green area, energy, climate change is the one issue of that, waste management, water management, transportation, and even education. Here just showed you what we have done so far in some university in Thailand for the setting the infrastructure, the green area. For the energy, we use like renewable energy, solar energy, and waste management, like Chulalongkorn University also promote zero waste, Chula zero waste. For example, water management. For the transportation, used with the bicycle or something like that, that can produce a very low carbon in university. Curriculum also very important issue that how we can develop curriculum suit to our nature, our environment, our problem as also very important. Here just show you on the ASEAN University toward a sustainable university, that the concept with the I already mentioned earlier, but not just only university, but we also work with the private sector. We call Thailand Business Council for Sustainable Development. Right now we have altogether 44 leading agencies. They also set their own target, carbon neutrality, and also net zero. Green public procurement also very important issue for our country to move forward based on the life cycle assessment. This some information I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Professor Vijan. It's such a PPP level in our nations as well, and good from Professor Yume that is become like a global connection. And of course, UPenn so powerful as a university-led university for the global movement. So last but not least, can I hear from our last speaker, Professor Stacey Ann from Kobe College? Yes, what have you done so far for this urgent call?
Well, one of the good things about Colby College is that we're a liberal arts college, and our focus is on liberal arts education. So that is how our curriculum is structured. Now, what that means is that we're not preparing students for the job market. We are intellectually preparing students to take on the challenges of the world. And a big part of that is broad exposure as well. And our president has taken a keen interest in the arts. So, for example, environmental humanities is a big offering that the college recently ventured into. And what this means is that we want our science students or biologists or computer scientists to also be aware of the arts and how they can incorporate the art into their daily lives, and also applying that to solve really big global challenges. So we definitely see liberal arts education as the future, and this is probably one of the things that we'd like to challenge a UPenn on, for example.
Yes.
You know, how we can prepare students to train them very broadly, to make them competent in some of the critical areas that we need to be discussing right now and into the future.
Can I ask you a question right now? It's
Sure.
very burning for me. When you want to convince a younger generation to do the passion-driven rather than business as usual kind of job, how can you convince them that?
Well,
'Cause,
I
of course,
think,
yes.
yeah, I think for us, a big part of it is self-selection. So the students that come to Colby know that this is what they want to do, right? They know that they want this kind of exposure, and they're looking for opportunities to be involved, not only on campus, but also in the local Waterville community in the state of Maine and globally. So I think that's one of the big advantages of being at Colby, and we try to curate the opportunities to increase student interest in some of the areas that they're not really familiar with. And that's one of the things that I've heard about my teaching personally that has brought me a lot of satisfaction, where students tell me that I'm exposing them to problems that they didn't know exist. So small island developing states, one of the things that I do is that I teach them about islands, right? Kiribati, Palau, the Marshalls, that they've never heard of before. And it's just a sensitization. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do as teachers, to make students aware of the problem and equip them appropriately to go out in the world to contribute to these problems in meaningful ways.
Thank you so much.
I had some other things I wanted
oh,
to
yes,
say,
yes.
right?
I think Vice Provost wants to have a mic soon.
Wait,
but yes.
right.
Okay, you go first. You go first.
Yeah, one of the critiques that I have personally, and this is not an institutional critique, is that sometimes colleges and universities are very focused on innovation. And innovation is great, but one of my personal interests is how can we think about problems in different ways, in new ways. And I thought about this when I heard the contribution from the United Nations University, and I'd like to talk to her after.
Sure.
Is that personally I've been very critical of the SDGs and its anthropocentric focus. So one of the things that I've done personally is to establish a Colby interspecies justice working group where we're trying to look at the SDGs and saying, okay, what aspect of these SDGs are almost too focused on, humans, and to recognize that there are other species that we co-inhabit the planet with,
Yes.
and how can we deliver justice for all species as well.
So you said the SDG kind of put us in silo in
Put
some
us
way.
in silos.
Oh my gosh.
And
yes.
its preference is human species. And you know me, Koch, I'm very focused on people, but we also need to be focused on people and planet.
Yes.
Right? So how can we think more creatively
Wow.
as a knowledge generating facility, right? How
Okay.
can we do that?
Yes, and I think what you're
I have
questioning
another
is
point,
actually for the audience, because all here probably higher education influencer somewhere. Yes. So
Right.
Yes.
And finally, and this is from the perspective of being Dean of Global Engagement, one of my colleagues said to me, Stacey, shouldn't we be focused more on connecting with universities in Europe? And I told them, listen, I'm not Dean of European Engagement. I'm Dean of Global Engagement.
Include us.
Right. So this means that we have to take a more inclusive approach to who we engage with. It also means that we have to see a variety of persons as being worthy of the engagement. And one of the things that I'm personally focused on is outlining a set of principles for doing this ethically. And one of the first principles is that the engagement should be mutually beneficial.
Wow.
So when I reach out to partners in countries such as Indonesia, this is one of the things that I emphasize to them.
Yes.
I'm not interested in doing something that's not of benefit to you. And I want to be very transparent in the process. And I think this, at least from my perspective, is an excellent foundation for building a truly transformative relationship.
Thank you so much. Can we give her a big hand? Yes, I think we have to make higher education more just in a way. But as you've been a little bit referenced in her speech a moment pause, I think you just kind of sit still. Do you have any response for that? From the UPenn.
Well, first of all, I think all universities and colleges really do the same thing. I mean, they do educate, do research, have operations, and they have to have advocacy. And I would say that in this generation, getting people interested in climate change is not the problem. They come interested in climate change. Our
Yes.
problem is twofold, it seems to me. One is to educate them more about the specific issues, especially since so much focus is on net carbon neutrality, and there's so much more to climate change than net
Yes.
carbon neutrality. I'm a doctor. There's some doctors here who work on education and health. And one of the big foci we have is we're not going to solve the net carbon neutrality problem. We are focused on adaptation issues and how we're going to adapt given the rise in temperature and the huge impact on just the human body and functioning. Similarly on agriculture and veterinary activities. And I think all of that needs to be a focus. I just want to mention three other things. One is, at Penn, one of the advantages we do have is we're a huge employer in Philadelphia, and we have a huge footprint, and we do serve as a model, can serve as a model employer. We have had for more than 10 years now a climate action policy, which I think guides us. And I think that's a very important thing. Secondly, on the education research continuum, We have 70 different centers that are and departments that are focused on climate change. And one of the things we do have is we have various groups that bring them together so that they aren't just separated but looking collectively. We have two represented here, one Perry World House, which deals with all things global and is now in the next decade going to focus on the global south and how the United States relates to the global south and policies related to climate change. And the Climate Center on Energy Policy, which is specifically looking at our energy policy across the university. And the last thing I want to say, to go back to a point I made before, which is about advocacy. One of the I would say one of the problems of universities, and I think ours is a good, we have very nice goals. We want to be climate neutral, but I think we tend to be not sufficiently ambitious. Our goal is to be carbon neutral by 2042. That's a very long time from now, and the Earth isn't going to be, it's too long. We've put in place to have LEED buildings at silver. Maybe that's not sufficient. So I think being more ambitious and being a model for others in our ambition is really, really important. It's important for all institutions to have a goal that's just out of reach. So we have to stretch to make sure it happens. And that will have, I think, it's good as an educational model for students, for faculty, and for the larger world to always try to go beyond what you know you can achieve.
Thank you so much. I really like what you have to say about net carbon zero. You not focus that too much, but you focus on humanity in general. Thank you. Professor, you may.
Okay, thank you very much. Just the short intervention, building upon her very interesting comment. And first of all, I have worked for the Tokyo Institute of Technology for 2 decades, educating engineering students. And I totally understand very well what you mentioned about this innovation. Too much focus on innovation. What I found at the engineering school is that they're so silo because they want to be innovative in their own area. They want to be fastest, they want to be lightest, they want to be the heaviest and so on. So when I joined the Tokyo Tech, this is not, okay, this is one area of really advancing the research, but probably that is not only way really to motivate a student to be engaged in the global issues. So I injected with the actually a mandatory course, they call International Development with Case Method. So case method is as probably you know, that you really have to be engaged as a role player in the scenario. Those scenarios actually happened somewhere in the world. Okay, so I utilized the case study of polio immunization and the Mongolian ICT when there is no electricity, for example. So I challenged my student who has no background of what is happening in those case scenarios, but we did a lot of simulation exercises. And as you know, engineering the student, their background is totally different. Chemical engineer think differently from civil engineer, and electric engineer, the students think differently from the material science, the engineer. So those, combination of the student with the background really made very interesting solutions. Because normally those case method story end at the peak of the problem. And you, as a engaging people, has to come up with solution and different options. Okay, so that's how really mobilized the student resources we have at the university, but engaged in the different perspectives to come up. Just one and a quick intervention about SDGs. I consider, well, coming from UN, but I consider SDGs as a platform really to take an advantage to revitalize what we are good at. So for example, we have biodiversity initiatives called Satoyama Satoumi initiatives. That project, we place the nature at the center of the attention. And human beings are being around of the nature. And we collected the globally, all of those are the practices, how, in a real sense, the nature is being coordinated with human actions to really live sustainably. And it's very interesting. Wherever you are located, we do have the same principle. And the solution is very much, nature-oriented, sustainability-based. And it's really powerful to share those experiences coming from different parts of the globe. But we do have similarities when we talk about this harmony between nature and the human being.
Thank
that's
you
a quick
so
introduction.
much, Professor Yume. Put not human, but nature in the center of the education as well, not an action. Professor Vichan, anything
thank you
to
very
add
much.
from Thailand side?
Yeah, I agree with you all, but when we talk about the climate change, as far as my career used to work with the student familiar with the climate change issue are more likely to take part, especially climate action. I think it's really important. I talk about the zero waste management. Some university already take that action. I talked to a young guy, a student from Bangladesh. He is computer science, but how computer science join with the climate action. He talked about the AI, right? That's another issue that we have to consider about that. What the young people can learn and can action on this kind of issue. And also the higher education can play a role, especially for the awareness raising, and how get the people around you to know and action on this issue. Very important. Curriculum, I mentioned earlier, not just only a single pillar. We have to work like interdisciplinary, social, economic, and environment, even the climate action. That's a very important issue, how we actually in university we have to bring professor to come to work together. In our country also we are facing the problem that professor from university they just want to research on the area that they are familiar with, like you mentioned
Yes.
about innovation or something. When they come together, that somehow is, I think it's really important issue. If we find the area is going to be vulnerability for the impact of the climate
Yes.
change, how professor, how students can join
Yes.
hands to work together. We talk about the net zero carbon neutrality today is for the long term that impact to the young people like yourself, how young people can take part
Yes.
of that. I think it's really important issue how we inform them.
Thank you so much, Professor Vichan. I think four of you and all of us here have so much influence on many life, especially the youth. Back to you, Stacey Ann.
Thank you.
Any burning?
No, I'm burning, right.
Yes.
All right, so earlier I spoke about making students aware, but I think there's another dimension of that we can't lose sight of as well, and that is making them sensitive to an issue. So not only the awareness, but the sensitization to an issue is also important. And I'll give you an example, just because you used the example of an engineer, but a couple weeks ago I had a very interesting exchange with an engineer. And she said to me, why should I continue to use my knowledge and skills to determine if a location is vulnerable only for people to continue living there? Now, the issue with that, I said, oftentimes when we have these reconnaissance trips, there's no anthropologist as a part of these teams, right? So my quick response was, what about a people's connection to the land? Is that not important? And it was almost as if my abilities to determine whether or not this place is vulnerable was more important than a person's connection to this particularly vulnerable place.
Exactly. I'm not
Right.
gonna move my house from Bangkok. Yes.
You know,
No, I'm not. We're not gonna
exactly.
move. Yes.
But there's no question about, whether this person and similar persons, are qualified, right? This is the knowledge transmission that takes place in universities. But can we also transmit a sensitivity that makes them more capable of contributing to a discussion that is almost more humane, right? So can we use our knowledge and skills in a way to recognize people's knowledge, beliefs, traditions, cultural heritage? All of these are important as well.
Yes.
So that's one of the things that I want to point out. The second thing,
I really like your first point first because I'm burning as well. That we, I just feel like we should use, enhance the human skill of human to connect to human more than just definition that's been defined.
right,
I might get an A.
A plus.
Thank you. Woohoo,
A
okay.
plus for that one.
Yes.
So not only you're an engineer or computer science, like can you relate to people in a human way? And can you then bring your knowledge and skills
Thank
to
you,
bear?
thank you, yes.
Right. The second thing is about SDG 15.
SDG 15.
Right. So there are many approaches to understanding the SDGs, right? And I think it's often easier for the environmental SDGs to have a nature-based focus, right? But there are also the social SDGs, the economic SDGs. So I think we need to push ourselves a little bit more, right? Not only focus on the natural synergies, but how can we put nature at the center of SDG 8, for example, which is that right to work, etc. So we not only need to think more creatively, but we also need to push those boundaries.
Yes.
Because we need to recognize that climate change, as Zeke said earlier, this is probably the biggest challenge we're going to face in our time. We haven't seen anything like this before.
Yes.
And we simply can't do business as usual.
Yes. Thank you. So our education, higher, mediums, any level need to be shifted. And now we have a time for the questions from the audience. This is very unique to put these four people who leading the world in some areas on the stage together. Is there any burning, urgent call as a question from all of the audience here? Yes. Can you stand up, introduce yourself, and then yes.
Hi, I'm Bibachu. I'm actually a student at Colby College with Professor Stacey Ann Robinson. And like she mentioned, it's a liberal arts school. I'm a computer science and science, technology, and society major. But I'm really interested in almost everything that's there in the world. And I think this question is for Professor Yume and Professor Zeke as well, since it's kind of policy, but also local development question. And I remember you mentioned about how you are mobilizing like local communities to solve these burning questions. And it's, I think, one of the most effective things to do. But I guess I had a question about how do we keep the economic challenges in consideration when we do this? For example, I come from Nepal, and it's one of the least developed countries in the world, and we face a lot of challenges like earthquakes, and then like a lot of people are migrating out of the country. And although like people would love to adopt a sustainable form of practice to sustain their livelihood, how they're not able to do so because of the economic challenges in their lives. So what are some of the things that could be done, have been done in level of policy as well as implementation? Yeah, so that's my question.
And I love Professor Vichan and Stacey Ann to put on this too. Like I'm wondering this question to the Thai policy as well. Yes, Professor Yume and Yes.
Thank you very much. So I worked with my lovely engineering student for the last 20 years. So I want to talk this economic aspect, not from the country's perspectives, but when we engage our student to any types of the project locally implemented. I want to talk about a bit about this economic aspect. When we collaborate with local institutions, for example, I ask my student from the very beginning, what are the sustainability issues to keep those engagement in the long-term perspectives? Okay, because those collaborations can stay long. For example, in Lao PDR, we engage our engineering student to protect World Heritage Site. Okay, and it's a student idea. They want to use the different types of information technology to protect the World Heritage Site. But then the idea is fine, but I only give the green light for such types of research when the student can come up with matrix of those sustainability. And one part is the financial sustainability, right? So my student really explore and engage open source resources. Okay, but open source resources has pros and cons, of course, right? So we really start from the very beginning, what it means to engage the local expert or the local institution to introduce those technologies. Okay, so that's a very important economic aspect. It's a small scale, but without those engagement, nothing is going to be sustainable or the long term. Okay, so that's the part of the sustainability. Maybe you can talk a bit wider.
Thank you.
Yeah, for the sustainable development that we all know the balancing between economic, social, and environment. But in terms of implementation, it's not that easy. We have no machine to measure how much for the economy, how much social, how much environment that we can go. That's not that easy, but policy and implementation policy, I think, is very important. For Thailand, I can give you, for example, when we talk about the GDP of the people, we have to think about the economy. But for the environmental issue, at the same time, we have to bring the environmental issue, even the climate change that we talk today, as the initiate development project as well. But in the real implementation, it's not that case because we have the government agency taking care of economy. We have a government agency taking care of social issue, environmental issue, and something. How bring them to work together, I think is very important. Now we have new policy we call BCG, Bio-Circular Green Economy. That's balancing between the economic and social and environmental issue, still in the early stage of implementation. That kind of thing.
Thank you. Back to you, Vice Provost Z. Yes.
So, look, economics is one of the fundamental barriers that need to be overcome. People aren't going to impoverish themselves. They're not going to lose money to transition. But we also need to be quite clear, it's not the only barrier. While it's a very important barrier, it's not, at least in the United States, you can buy an electric vehicle now for the price of a gas-powered car. There are other barriers, people's psychological barrier about how far they can drive and things like that. And so I think there are multiple barriers we need to consider, and we need to consider human behavior. And I would just go back to this issue about the issue of innovation. We certainly need innovation. The fact that innovation has brought the price of solar, the price of wind down below fossil fuels, hugely important, but it's not sufficient. And then it does go to this other issue of implementation, human behaviors and how we get people to actually change, since we're all lazy, we don't like change, and that we have to induce people and take away the barriers to making them change. And I think it's complicated, which is why you have to involve the whole university or the whole system, and no single group is going to solve it. And I think that actually is one thing universities are better at than most, which is integrating people from a variety of disciplines to focus on a series of steps along the way to make a solution viable. I know that's one of the things we're committed to doing. We do it imperfectly like most things, but...
So are you going to break silo at the UPenn?
What?
Are you going to break all the silo at the UPenn?
We've tried to, we've tried to do that. As I said, it's imperfect. And I do think one of the biggest problems universities have lots of problems, but one of the biggest problems is departments that hire faculty and do research, they tend to be focused on their area of expertise and not what's important for the world and not what's important for the university. And one of the things that people in universities have to do is to tell people to stop. I think you were stop just focusing on what you're doing and focus on the bigger problem and getting a group of people who can solve it from various different angles.
Thank you.
As I said, just making something cheap isn't going to solve it.
Yes.
You need other talents
Creativities
and other
and many
research.
more. Yes, thank you. Is that, Stacey Ann, you want to add up from our speakers?
Okay, so one of the things I just said is that climate change is the biggest challenge that we'll face as humanity. But for me, one of the interesting things is that this may not be true from a day-to-day perspective.
Yes.
So every day, a person might not get up and say, you know, today, climate change is my biggest problem.
No, it's
right?
about how I'm going to eat.
How am I going to eat? Thank
how I'm going to
you.
get work.
How am I going to get
Normal
work?
job.
No job,
Yes.
right? So part of addressing this overarching crisis is also addressing these, what I call bread and butter issues, right? These essential questions, like you said, Kat. How am I going to eat? How am I going to send my kids to school? You know, where am I going to get water from? If my country is at war, I'm probably thinking, will I make it through the night?
Yes.
So I think when we devise policy approaches, we also have to keep this in mind, that today, for a particular individual or for a particular household, climate change might not be the biggest issue on that day, right? So we have to address lifestyles and household issues, right? How can we address the climate challenge that an individual or household is facing while also addressing the economic challenges, the social challenges? So we have to take this holistic approach to addressing climate change. And I think another part of that as well is showing persons how climate change can actually make their pressing problem worse.
Yes.
So if, for example, my biggest problem today is I don't have a job, how can climate change make that worse? And I think that's an opportunity to get persons more involved in taking climate action.
Climate change equal opportunities. Yes. How can we educate them to see that point and educate all of us here? So last but not least, is there any more questions from the audience? We can have one or two more.
Hi, I'm Simon Richter from the University of Pennsylvania. You all have described things that your universities, colleges, your institutions are doing to meet the need to answer the urgent call. Students, my students, I'm sure your students too, if they've been following headlines, stories about the COP, my sense is they're quite deluded, disillusioned. They're really concerned about what's going on, whether it makes sense for them to have faith in the Paris Agreement, in the COP, in COP28 and so on. So I'm wondering, what do you register this too with your students? And what do you say to your students?
Oh my gosh, this is a very burning question to me too. How can you teach them to have hope in such a hopeless situation. Any more questions? Hold on. So I will wrap maybe one more questions from the audience. So yes, please introduce yourself and yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Aisha Al-Mazroui. I really like the comments that you mentioned, especially about climate change. I don't have a question. I like your work, but I just wanted to say you are all stakeholders of the thing that I'm going to present now. Next month, we have a World Environmental Education Congress happening in Abu Dhabi, just 2 hours away from here. And we would love for you to research about it, to register. It's a really huge networking opportunity for all educators. So I'm handling the youth part, but you're welcome to come, to join, to network with people. It would be really lovely to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. So back on the stage, how can we teach young people to hope in this depressing situation? Yeah, I'm very sad now.
Well, I think most people who are involved with academics are used to being manic depressive anyway, because I think they have a brilliant insight and then they realize, nah, maybe not. But I think for students, it's important to show them how they can actually make a difference. They're not going to change the whole trajectory of the earth, but there are things they can do and actions that they can take. And I think that is, they're very much seeking something that is both impactful and meaningful to themselves. And I think if we can help them see how to be impactful, it is a problem, I think, when we do have stalemate at major events like COP, or we have backtracking from important goals. That does tend to undermine optimism. Yes. But I do think figuring out what you can do in a practical sense is mostly what I think, how can I be impactful, is what I find my students really want. And as a professor, helping them see how they can actually make a difference is really the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Provost C, about how can we have them see the impact they can make to the world, and how can the university lead them to that path. It's so important. Thank you. Professor, you may.
Thank you. Okay, so we talked about the problem of the silo, talked about too much of the concentration, and talked about the gaps between the policies and implementation, right? But just to be optimistic, I will share one example.
Yes.
Bhutan. We work with the Ministry of Education in Bhutan, and Bhutan was the country last year, one of the few countries which achieved negative CO2 emission. Okay, so we invited the head of the ministry and asked, head of actually the cabinet office, and asked what is happening in the country. And what was really interesting was that there is the environmental policy which is understood by all the teachers. So that means all the teachers understand their policy and how the people can contribute. Teachers teach the student. So at every single school in Bhutan, the students are aware from elementary school to the university how their activities, daily actions can really contribute. So there is no notion that this is really developed by the Ministry of Environment, so it has nothing to do with Ministry of Education, which happens everywhere in the world. So, okay, Bhutan is a very small country, so people may say that that's why it can happen. But I think in principle, this is really the engagement, country as a, the country as a nation to really govern, and they organize the people's, the action to motivate. This is really the way to go along. So I think the policymakers, of course, United Nations, really have to push those engagement at the very local levels implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a hopeful example. Back to you,
yeah.
Professor Vijan. What
Okay.
Thai hope can be
It's
seed
just,
to the young people?
Our hope is Thailand would like to work with developed country like your country. Climate change is the global problem. We have to work together. If we can create network from university that we can share our knowledge, share our experience. We have policy, global policy, we have national policy, but the real action on the ground, I think is really important. Somehow, action on the ground have to maybe vary by country to country, community to community. How you have that research, maybe developed country have that research a lot. How the research in developed country can maybe transfer to our country. I think this work and form policy action on the ground, I think is really important. Hope we can start to join, to work together to solve our same problem, climate change together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last but not least, Stacey Ann. Yes, can you have the final word for the session?
Right. So this is one of the things that I teach about when I teach global climate policy is climate anxiety. And I always try to start off with a definition. And like many things in global climate policy, there's no agreed definition. But what you'll generally see about climate anxiety is a definition that focuses on the negative cognitive impacts of concerns over climate change. And I tend to focus on the concerns because I see it almost as being different from those who have experienced climate change. So one of the things that I try to emphasize to students is no matter how bad you think your situation is, there's always somebody in a worse situation. So to get them to think about what's happening elsewhere and to see, you know, boy, I've never experienced a Category 5 hurricane. I don't know what that is like, right? So I can have hope in that. Another thing is that I always pay attention to how I structure my courses. If I'm going to talk about colonialism and the impacts on climate vulnerability, I start with that, but never end with that. So you always want to leave students with something that they can find that hope in, that they can be optimistic about. So as teachers, we have roles across the entire spectrum, but I think as universities, we can have a bigger collective role as well.
Thank you so much. Can we give bigger applause to all the speakers? It's such an honor to have all of you here.